Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're heading out into deep space.
Yeah, way out into the Arcash fringe.
Right, but the story we're covering today it feels uncomfortably close to home.
It really does. It's a textbook example of how fragile peace actually is.
Yeah, because we're looking at a conflict that spiraled from this really boring trade dispute into a catastrophic war. I mean, we're talking biological weapons, industrial sabotage, the whole nine yards.
Stormfront War.
Exactly. And our mission today is to unpack exactly how that happened because you have these two neighboring worlds fully dependent on each other who just managed to destroy their economies and their ecosystems in record time.
And we are going to analyze this war not just as a sequence of space battles, but really as a case study of manipulation.
Hmm.
We've got access to the Neo-Mercy clan archives, intercepted dialogue logs between the commanders, and this is my favorite part, the Galactic World Chart data.
The world chart data is so fascinating, and I want to start right there, actually, to set the scene for you listening. So, Planet 5 in the Arcash Fringe, Ovarian. What are we dealing with here?
Okay, so imagine a world that is essentially one giant perpetual thunderstorm.
Just constant lightning.
Constant. And the dominant species there, the Ovaria, they've adapted to it. The world chart describes them as bold aerospace engineers, and they have an aggression level of 6.
Let's pause on that for a second. Aggression level 6. Because 6 out of 10, what does that actually mean in the context of the census?
Right, it's a psychometric rating used by the Galactic Census. A 6 implies a civilization that is assertive. They're willing to use force to protect their interests, but they aren't inherently predatory.
So they won't invade you just for fun.
Exactly. But if you step on their toes, they will absolutely shove you back.
And their toes, in this specific case, are their energy spires, right?
Yes. Their entire civilization is built around harvesting that atmospheric lightning. They have these massive conductive spires that catch the strikes, store the energy, and then they sell it. I mean, they literally power half the galaxy. So culturally, they're high energy, high stakes,
Yeah.
very industrial.
Heavy metal lightning harvesters.
That's a good way to put it.
So that's one side. But then in the neighboring system, or neighboring orbit, we have Planet 7, Nelcoria.
The complete antithesis of Ovarian.
Yeah.
Nelcoria is this delicate ecosystem of moss plains and fungal forests. And the Nelcori people are listed on the chart as patient and friendly. Their aggression level is only a 2.
Which seems incredibly low for a spacefaring civilization. I mean, a 2.
It is very low. They don't do conquest at all. They live in total symbiosis with their biosphere. Their technology isn't built in a factory. It's grown. They use living bioships made of these moss lattice constructs.
Wow. So patient community gardeners on one side, aggressive industrial engineers on the other.
And for centuries, it worked perfectly. Ovarian needs food and medicine from the moss, and Nelcoria needs energy from the lightning. It was a perfect symbiotic loop.
Until it wasn't, because the catalyst for this whole war, it seems to be pollution. The logs show the Ovari energy industry allegedly started leaking toxic byproducts into the Nelcori warp lanes.
Well, allegedly is the word the Ovari used.
Right, of course.
The Nelcori, specifically their leader, Lattice Keeper Bernashi, claimed these toxins were drifting into their atmosphere and actually killing the moss plains.
And Bernashi's reaction wasn't to attack, because, again, aggression level 2.
Correct. Bernashi did exactly what a patient leader does. He filed a formal complaint. He asked for environmental audits. And when that didn't work, he set up a blockade of the trade routes to prevent further contamination. It was a purely defensive move.
But the Ovari commander, Wing Commander Evrai, did not see it that way at all.
No, he didn't. And you have to put yourself in Jeffrey's position for a minute. He's an engineer at heart, but he's responsible for the Ovari economy. He viewed the blockade not as a protest, but as an existential threat.
Because if Ovarian stops exporting energy, their whole society collapses.
Exactly. So he dismissed the Nelcori claims entirely. He actually called it ecological paranoia.
So Xevri thinks Bernashi is just making it all up to negotiate a better trade price, and Bernashi thinks Xevri is literally killing his planet for profit.
It's a classic deadlock. You have legitimate economic anxiety clashing with legitimate environmental survival. And usually, a dispute like this ends in a summit. Maybe some shouting, maybe a tariff, and then a treaty.
But it didn't end that way here. This is where the story takes a really sharp turn, because right in the middle of this tense standoff, something blows up.
2 major Ovari freighters.
Yeah.
They're just sitting in the blockade zone and suddenly gone. Total destruction.
Now, if you're Xevri, you're already paranoid. You already think these Moss people are trying to strangle your economy, and then your ships explode.
He didn't even hesitate. Xevri saw the wreckage and immediately blamed the Nelkori. To him, this was proof that the whole friendly aggression level 2 thing was just a mask. He thought they were secret extremists.
But Bernashi completely denied it. And looking at the intercepted transcripts, he sounds genuinely confused. He says, and I quote, "The Nelkori do not wage war through deception."
And he was telling the truth. The Nelkori didn't fire a single shot.
Okay, so if the environmentalists didn't do it, and the Ovari obviously didn't blow up their own freighters, who did?
This is where we have to zoom out and look at the world chart data again, because there was a third party watching this entire dispute unfold, someone who wasn't in the news but was definitely operating in the sector.
Right.
Enter Faresh.
Faresh of the Kill Zone, I'm looking at their entry here. Planet 27, Aurora Spindle. Aggression level, wow, 8.
Yeah, that's a significant jump from the Ovari's 6.
Yeah.
The notes on the kill zone describe them as prone to violent expansions and sabotage. And Faresh himself isn't a politician. He's a corporate war profiteer.
So he just happened to be passing by and decided to get involved.
He was actively monitoring the tension. Faresh saw 2 civilizations sitting on a powder keg, and he just decided to provide the match. The intel reveals that Faresh hired mercenaries, dressed them up as Nelkori activists. I mean, fake bioarmor, the whole 9 yards, and had them attack those Ovari ships.
A textbook false flag operation.
Completely textbook. He knew exactly what Zevri's bias was. He knew Zevri was terrified the Nelkori were secretly violent, so Faresh just gave him the visual proof he needed.
And at the same time, the Ovari military retaliation basically confirmed Bernashi's fear that the Ovari were ruthless destroyers.
Exactly. It's terrifyingly efficient. He didn't even have to convince them to hate each other. He just had to validate the suspicions they already held. He radicalized them against each other in a single afternoon.
But Faresh didn't just light the fuse and walk away, because a short war isn't actually profitable, right? If the Ovaris wipe out the Nelkori in a week, Faresh can't sell them ammo next month.
Precisely. Faresh needed the war to sustain itself. It had to be a grind. So he introduced a second agent into the mix, a neutral mediator named Kelvash.
Kelvash of the Varim, Planet 2. They're described as a serious desert warrior culture, aggression level 5.
Kelvash positioned himself as the adult in the room. He showed up on Zevri's battlecruiser, the Tempest Vang, claiming he was there to broker peace.
I read the logs of his negotiations, and they are so frustrating to read. Every single time Zevri seems ready to cool down and look at the facts, Kelvash drops a comment like, "Can you really trust them after what happened to the freighters?" Or he proposes a revised trade agreement that he knows for a fact the Nelkori will reject.
He was stalling. His entire job was managing the temperature of the conflict. Keep it hot enough to fight, but not hot enough to end. There's a moment in the transcripts where Kelvash tells Zevri, "War is costly. I come only to facilitate balance."
Balance. Which sounds nice, but in this context, it is so sinister.
Balance for a war profiteer means a stalemate. He didn't want Ovarium to win, and he didn't want Nelkoria to win. He wanted them to keep grinding each other down, so Faresh could sell weapons to the Ovari and energy supplements to the Nelkoria on the black market.
Faresh actually has a line in the comms where he says, "War is not about winning, it is about enduring."
Yeah.
That is such a bleak worldview. He's treating warfare like a subscription service.
It creates a perpetual consumption engine. As long as the Ovari are firing lightning and the Nelkori are growing spores, Fur is making money.
Let's talk about that combat, actually, because we have these 2 very different cultures throwing down. You mentioned the Ovari use lightning and the Nelkori use moss. How does that actually look in a space battle? Because moss against a battleship doesn't sound like a fair fight.
You'd be surprised. The Ovari combat style is very industrial. They use these storm-hardened battleships and smaller fighters called Stormcraft.
Yeah.
And these ships are incredibly heavily shielded because they essentially weaponize electromagnetic surges.
Right.
They fire directed lightning that fries enemy electronics and overloads shields. It's brute force. It's loud, it's bright, it's aggressive.
And the Nelkori response?
Biological warfare, but highly sophisticated. They deployed spore drones. Now, these aren't missiles in the traditional sense. They are dense clouds of corrosive engineered fungus.
Oh, man.
They attach to the hull of an Ovari ship and immediately start eating the silicone seals. Or they get sucked into the ventilation systems that just clog the air scrubbers.
That is horrifying. You're basically fighting aggressive, weaponized mold.
And it was incredibly effective. The Ovari fleets were losing power because their energy conduits were literally being digested by moss.
Wow.
But then the war takes another massive turn. The Nelkori moss lattices, their home turf, their actual living ships, They start dying.
But not from the Ovari lightning.
No, this was entirely different. The moss was withering rapidly. It was turning gray and brittle. Bernashi scientists analyzed the decay and realized something terrifying. The cause wasn't the Ovari industrial waste. It was a pathogen.
A disease.
An engineered disease. The genetic markers were all wrong. It didn't evolve naturally from the Nalkori biosphere, and this is the crucial part. It was far too complex biologically to have been created by the Ovari.
Right, because the Ovari are aerospace engineers, not geneticists.
Exactly. They harvest lightning. They don't splice genes. Bernashi realized that this pathogen was a foreign agent. It was planted specifically to wipe out the moss and enrage the Nalkori even further.
It was Faresh again?
It was Faresh. He was double-dipping. He was selling weapons to the Ovari to fight the moss threat, and simultaneously he was poisoning the Nalkori to make them fight harder for their very survival.
That is just diabolical. He is actively managing the aggression levels of both sides. But this discovery, this pathogen, it's the smoking gun, isn't it? This is where the whole scheme finally starts to unravel.
It is. But it required one more piece of the puzzle to really end the war. Because while Bernashi is staring at this engineered pathogen, Gavri is having a crisis of conscience over on the Tempest Fang.
Right, the leak.
Yes. A rogue commander within the Ovari fleet, someone who likely saw the environmental damage firsthand, leaked a massive stack of internal documents directly to Zivri.
And what was actually in those documents?
Hard proof. Data showing that Ovarian was actually leaking toxic byproducts into the warplanes, exactly like Bernashi had originally claimed at the very start of all this.
Wow. So Severi started this massive war to defend his people against a lie, only to find out the lie was actually true.
It completely shattered his worldview. He realized his own government had been lying to him from day one. He was fighting for a moral high ground that simply didn't exist.
That's a heavy moment for a character like Severi. He's an aggression level 6. He's a proud wing commander. Admitting he was wrong takes a lot.
It really does. But that vulnerability is exactly what opened the door for peace. Because now you have Zivri, who knows he's been played by his own government and by this mediator Kelvash, and you have Bernashi, who knows the true enemy is a third-party bioterrorist.
So how did they connect the dots? Did they just hail each other on the comms?
Essentially, yes. They opened a secure encrypted channel. Zivri admitted the environmental leaks were real. Bernashi shared the genetic data on the pathogen. And suddenly, the whole picture cleared up. They realized together that Kelvash and Faresh were the architects of this entire nightmare.
Which leads us to the climax, the breaking of the storm front. I love the visual, the source material paints here.
It is incredibly cinematic. You have the Ovari fleet and the Nalkori bioships up in high orbit, weapons hot, locked on each other. And Faresh's mercenary flagship, the Prophet's Shadow, is cloaked nearby, just sitting there watching the fireworks, waiting to scavenge whatever's left.
But the fireworks don't go off, at least not at each other.
Right. Zivri and Bernashi coordinated a secret ceasefire. The Ovari ships rotated their turrets. The Nalkori bioships formed up in a flanking formation. And then they turned their combined attention to the empty patch of space where Faresh was hiding.
Wait, how did they find him if his ship was cloaked?
Zivri tracked the transmission signals that Kelvash was sending from the Tempest Fang back to Faresh's flagship. And then they unleashed a perfectly synchronized combined attack.
And this is where that whole industrial versus biological thing becomes a massive strength, right?
Exactly. They used their differences perfectly. The Ovari hit the area with a massive electromagnetic surge, basically a concentrated artificial lightning strike. It overloaded Faresh's cloaking device and instantly dropped his shields.
Leaving the physical hull completely exposed.
Right. But instead of just blowing it up with lasers, the Nalkori launched a massive spore wave. But these weren't the slow, corrosive spores. These were rapid-growth fungal blooms, specifically targeted at the ship's reactor cooling intakes.
They choked the engine?
Within minutes, the Prophet's Shadow was completely dead in the water. No shields, no engines, just drifting in orbit.
That is so satisfying. They used the exact differences that Faresh tried to exploit the lightning and the moss to take him down.
It was a perfect synthesis of their two cultures. But Faresh is a very slippery character.
Yeah, he doesn't exactly surrender and go to space jail.
No, he doesn't. When the systems failed, Faresh realized he had completely lost control of the narrative. But he didn't panic. He just calmly initiated a self-destruct sequence on his entire fleet.
Scorched earth, just destroy all the evidence.
And cover his own tracks. The explosion was massive. It vaporized the mercenary fleet. But later forensic analysis of the debris field suggests that a small, high-speed shuttle launched mere moments before the detonation.
And we have that final transmission from him as he leaves. It honestly gave me chills reading it.
Yeah, he says, "A single war never ends. It merely changes hands."
It is so arrogant. It implies he's just closing up shop and moving on to the next client.
Well, Kelbosh wasn't quite so lucky. He was still on the Avari ship, so he's captured and imprisoned. But Farr's in the wind.
So they won the battle, they stopped the manipulator, but reading the outro notes from the archives, this really isn't a happy ending for anyone.
No war ever is. The aftermath was brutal. Ovarian's industry was described as shattered. They were forced into strict environmental oversight, which crippled their economy for decades.
And Nelcoria.
Deeply, deeply scarred. The engineered pathogen didn't just vanish when Farish left. It had infected the biosphere. It's going to take generations for those moss plains to fully heal.
There's that final conversation log between Zevri and Bernashi. They're standing together in a ruined Ovari energy spire, just looking out at the damage. And Bernashi asks, was it worth it?
And Zevri replies, no war ever is. It's a moment of profound clarity for both of them, because the only actual winner in the Stormfront War was Farish. He made his money and left before the bill came due.
It really highlights the danger of those aggression levels we talked about earlier. We saw how a friendly level 2 civilization and a bold level 6 civilization were both so easily manipulated by a level 8.
It shows that high aggression isn't just about physical violence or having the biggest guns. It's about the willingness to exploit others. Farish used his aggression to find the psychological weak points of everyone around him. He literally weaponized Zevri's pride and Bernashi's fear.
You know, speaking of aggression levels, I was scrolling to the very bottom of the Galactic World Chart data you sent over. Because we've been treating the Killzon at level 8 as the ultimate bad guys here, right? The most dangerous actors in the region.
Yeah, you saw the Milky Way entry.
I did. I almost missed it, but I saw it. Earthers. Aggression level 10.
Yeah, it is a very sobering data point.
And the comment attached to it in the census says, limitless imagination and pure thirst for power and control.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? We sit here analyzing Farish as this monster for treating war as a business. But according to the Galactic Census, we humans are statistically more dangerous, more aggressive, and more prone to domination than the Killzon ever were.
That is a genuinely scary thought, especially considering what Farish said about war changing hands. If he's out there looking for a new market, a place with high aggression, a love for conflict, and a limitless imagination for destruction,
he might feel right at home here. If war is a business, Earth might just be the biggest marketplace in the galaxy.
Well, that is a terrifying thought to leave you with. Farish is still out there, and statistically speaking, we are exactly the kind of customers he is looking for. So consider how easily legitimate disputes can be hijacked by people who profit from chaos.
It's a reminder to always check who actually benefits when the fighting starts, whether it's out on the Arcash fringe or right here at home.
Absolutely. Keep your eyes on the shadows, everyone. We'll see you in the next deep dive.